So I'm here at Brown University, and I've got a tablecloth which simply says, "Can you justify not being vegan?" And so I'm interested. What justifications come to mind to morally justify not consuming animal products, or morally justify consuming animal products?
Well, first I was just curious from hearing like your last debate, like you personally, where is your justification for being vegan? Like, does it stem from like a moralistic argument, or economic, or both, or environmental?
Yeah. So for me, I became vegan for ethics because I could find no moral justification for harming animals. But since being vegan, it's somewhat broadened, and I look at the environmental aspects. I look at the human exploitation that occurs in slaughterhouses and indeed in farms as well, factory farms especially. And so it kind of became like a combination of all these things in the end. But it was definitely that moral perspective that encouraged me to change in the first place.
Okay. So I guess like the main justification for me is that to be vegan, it's a choice, and to do so, you need privilege behind it, right? Because one, although like if you look at beans and potatoes versus meat, right, it's more affordable for that option. Like in America, for example, middle America, food deserts, places where people's cultural heritage, business are defined by meat produce, for better or for worse. Yes. To be told by people from a place of privilege saying, "Oh, you should do this," first of all, it's impossible because that's their livelihood, that's their way of life. And also in these places, because of food deserts, the only place where they go down to the local bodega or fast food place, and meat is on the menu. Yes.
And I think that what you raised there is a very valid point. That is more of a criticism of the socio-economic climate rather than of being vegan as a moralistic pursuit. And what I always say to that then is it comes down to the issue of necessity, right? And so we could morally justify an action if it could be deemed to be a necessity for our survival. And so if you live in say, like a place of a true food desert where you're relying on say, cheap, affordable fast food to feed your family, maybe you've got a single mother working 2 jobs, then it becomes quite challenging to then point the finger and say that you need to be held morally responsible. But then if we look at the wider society, then what I would say the majority of people that do have some sort of financial autonomy and the privilege to go to, say, Target or Walgreens or wherever it may be and buy fresh produce and even tinned beans, legumes, rices, potatoes, pastas as well, then I believe that the moral imperative lies on those who have the privilege to buy those products, because in doing so you increase the demand, and so by increasing the demand you increase the supply, which brings down the price of these products to begin with, but also makes them more widely accessible. And so I believe that it's mutually beneficial for those in situations of impoverishment if we become vegan and buy those products, because in the long run it'll help those impoverished areas have that accessibility that currently they might not well have. But I do think that's a valid argument, but I don't know your personal situation, but it wouldn't be a valid argument for me. And so let me flip somewhat of the conversation and say, if the main argument you came in was the idea of it being elitist, but also from a privileged stance. And as I said, I really don't want to comment on your financial situation or your life at all. But at the same time, do you think that argument holds up in your own life? And if it doesn't, then what justification do you have as an individual not to be vegan?
Okay, so it's when you ask, it's more of a personal justification.
Yes.
Okay.
What is you as an individual?
Well, my justification is that I believe that unfortunately we live in a capitalist society. I'm going to go to the capitalism right there. That I as a person, I have privilege to the point that I can make conscious decisions that go against market, that go against like our national economic interest, right? Like I can go to the supermarket and I understand, I'm educated enough from going to a school. I understand the pros and cons, and I make a conscious choice. When I get that hamburger, I know that it takes 600 gallons of water to make that piece of meat, but I still eat it, And is that a moral flaw on my part? Maybe, but at the same time, yeah. Personally, that's my justification, is that I believe that this is okay because of the society that gives it to me. Like, I go by society, right? It's the same with morals, is that I feel that in a world, especially being at a place like Brown, which is a very liberal bubble, where everyone believes that they have a very unique, independent, mindset, but actually, with talking to people, they're very, very alike, in the same way, is that I believe that 90% of my ideas are influenced and are created from my life existence, right? Yeah. The places I go, the schools, my parents, this and that. Right. So I believe at the same time, I live in a world where society tells me this thing is okay, and I'm okay with buying into that.
So we have to. So if we're using society and culture as a justification, we have to apply that somewhat universally. And so, would the argument be made then that female genital mutilation should be morally acceptable simply because in the countries where it's legal, it's societally accepted?
Well, also I believe in westernization, right? And I believe in some ideas of Western culture should be implemented in the rest of the world. You know, I buy into the ideas of American exceptionalism, although they're flawed in many ways, right? So in that sense, again, going back to society, I've been taught these principles, they've been instilled in me, and what's okay here, and if it's not being practiced there, like we don't have genital mutilation in the United States, hence I see that as wrong.
Male genital mutilation.
Yes, yeah, okay, yeah, but that's a whole different story. We're not going to go into that. Yeah. So again, going off that, I see that as morally wrong because I buy into the American, what we'd call like Western society. Again, this is very elitist, but that's.
But the argument, if the argument is strictly cultural, the argument is, well, my culture's best. It's obviously some sort of ingrained form of ideological nationalism, I guess. Which I'm not saying that to be like, oh, populism. It's not. That's not the point. But the idea that is kind of fundamentally what it is. That still doesn't justify what we do to animals in this country because that's still a product. You're still a product of what culture raises you to believe. And so let's go to Saudi Arabia, where where young girls have genital mutilation performed on them, but also more importantly, where abuse of people and human rights is just commonly and socially accepted. If they were to turn around and say, well, I don't believe in Western ideology, I believe in Sharia law and I believe in the ideology of the Quran, we don't then turn around and say, oh, well, that's fine then, you carry on doing what you're doing. We say, well, that's objectively morally wrong. And objective morals come from, I believe the objective morals come from the understanding of whether or not our actions cause harm and suffering, and that isn't. I believe that to be, if we go back to Mesopotamia times, before Judeo-Christian values around 600 years before, it was illegal to murder, and so I do believe there is an objective core morality that somewhat transcends just what culture has taught us, but instead is kind of ingrained within us to teach us that it's empathy, right? If it causes suffering, it's something we should assess and frown upon if that action isn't a necessity. And so I guess I don't believe that culture and tradition holds veracity in terms of how we treat other beings.
Yeah. But also then you get into this impossible question of where do you draw the line of what animals, organisms can we kill, right? Like what brings in, what defines existence, right? And that's just like this impossible argument that you can draw the line here, you can draw the line there. But I would say that, like, at least for me, how I justify it is ecological Darwinism, in the sense of survival of the fittest, right? That we have evolved, there was a point that I think for sure humanity as a whole have become above evolution, have become above the science and nature, right? That we're above it, and we've developed enough to be able to control it. But there was a time that we were hunters, that still we were within this natural cycle. We hadn't broken nature yet, right? And in that saying, I think that naturally, then they say, oh, well, we don't have canines, right? But we have developed a taste for meat, And I think with that, it's justified to kill, right? Especially then you go to the point that a lot of livestock has been raised to be like cows, pigs. These have been domesticated to be built in to this. Now, of course, they can be used for produce. They don't always have to be used for meat. But the same way, these animals have been mutated, have evolved to cater the needs of our diets, right?
Right. Yeah. To use the word evolved is, I believe, to be somewhat disingenuous because it's not a natural process. It's a process of being selectively bred. But I would say that behaviours of the past don't set a moral precedent for contemporary behaviours. And I guess if we're looking at, where do we draw that line? Well, okay, so we've got animals, we've got plants, and I guess we have bacteria. We can probably discontinue bacteria from the moral consideration. And when you make that argument, are you saying that do we draw the line at plants, or are you where? Because obviously you have an animal in mind or a line in mind. Where do you draw that line?
Well, I mean, to name a few, I'm not going to eat a human, right?
Okay.
And I don't think anyone should eat humans, right? I wouldn't eat a dog. But I understand that some cultures in society, going back to the culture argument, eat dogs. For example, Thailand, the Thai. And although I won't eat a dog, I I don't have anything against people that eat a dog. Now, for example, a shark fin, like stuff like that, I don't think anyone should eat that. Not because I think it's morally wrong, but I think it's the ethics of it with them being an endangered species, right? The environmental impact of taking away sharks, right? Yeah. Like, I don't think we should be going to endangered species. But, one, I think you can make an argument for deer meat, like the overpopulation of deer, the overpopulation of any animals, right? That having meat in our diet helps, because even though we've broken nature, we still play a drastic role, right? And the rest of nature has adapted for the meteoric rise of Homo sapien, right? And we have, as meat eaters, as consumers of that food product, have a way to play within the world. And if you eliminate that immediately, even if you eliminate that with over time, 10,000 years, 100,000 years, right? Yeah. That's going to have a huge environmental impact that may not be to the benefit of our civilization. Oh,
yeah. So I would presume that we can all agree that factory farming and farming in that sense has no ecological benefit. Okay, but so the argument would then, does hunting have an ecological benefit because of deer overpopulation? Okay, great. And so we have to look at the causes of these problems. And so I'm sure in like Connecticut, for example, there is an issue of deer overpopulation. But we have to look at the reasons for that and provide some context to how we've ended in this system, because nature has food chains, and those food chains primarily are there to ensure that population sizes of animals are somewhat maintained. And so the introduction of industrialized agriculture, particularly animal agriculture, has caused a destabilization in natural population sizes. Because we've destroyed so much habitat and so much land to produce grazing sites and also areas for crop production to be fed to animals. But in doing so, we've also hunted many predators to the point of extinction, precisely because those predators were hunting livestock and killing livestock animals. So to benefit the profits of the farmers, we've hunted these animals to extinction. So we've taken out predators from the food chain. We've removed vast areas of habitat and land, and so now we have an issue of deer being overpopulated in the area. And so the solution isn't to hunt them. That's like putting a band-aid on a kind of a cut artery, so to speak. The issue is to solve the problem properly. So eliminate animal agriculture and allow a system of rewilding to occur, where we allow natural habitats to replenish. And then in doing so, we can reintroduce natural predators, which will then somewhat equalize the destabilized food chain and the overproduction or the overpopulation of deer. And so in that, we create a more harmonious symbiotic relationship, instead of going into woods and forests with high-powered rifles saying that we're somehow creating a fair ecology. That doesn't deal with the root of the problem.
I would love to talk more, but my friend's been waiting for a while, and I have to go to class. It was very nice meeting you.
What a pleasure. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
You're having a lecture tonight?
I am. 5 o'clock. I'm not sure where.
Well, I'll find out.
Please do.
Yeah, very nice meeting you.
Lovely meeting you too. Have a great day.
Okay, bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye now.
I just want to talk a little bit about the last thing you said about like what the solution might be to kind of reintegrate the ecosystem, yes, to do away with agricultural farming.
Nice.
I think that's like an awesome idea. I mean, I think that the issue is that, well, you said that I don't think it would be so easy for it to come back to balance. I mean, like logistically, to make that happen, it was a very delicate situation before, yeah, that we messed up. Yeah. When we like industrialized everything. So I was like, if you just would talk a little more of that, I'd be interested to hear about that. And I also want to talk about being vegan. I have some arguments about that as well. Cool. If you want to talk about that, I understand that.
Oh, I'd love to talk about that. That's why I'm here. So in relation to what you said at the beginning, I think that you raised a good point in that we can oversimplify the solutions to the problems, but I still believe that solution is warranted of an attempt, and no doubt it's going to take generations probably to restore the damage that we've caused as humans. But that doesn't justify not putting those practices into place now. And the best thing we can do for ecology is take out industrialized animal agriculture, or not even industrialized, just animal agriculture in general. And then we can reduce the amount of land that we need for that, allow that to repopulate. What we do then is we create more forests, more woodlands, which is better for CO2 absorption, oxygen production, but it also provides habitats for biodiversity and species of animals that we've somewhat taken to the point of extinction through our actions. So this isn't just about creating a better food chain for natural predators and deer and then vegetation. It's about creating areas of land where birds and insects even and biodiversity can replenish and create a more symbiotic relationship.
Yeah, so basically you want to like bring back, the whole free evolution kind of idea.
Right.
That's very cool.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. All right, so I guess this argument against being vegan or against veganism, what I would say is it seems like where your being vegan lies in it's like the moral issue. Is it the killing of the animal that is the problem for you, or is it more about like it's part of a bigger system? And so what it seems like it's like that is part of a bigger thing.
For me, it's not just about killing. It's about a system of use, and it's about the fact that we've demoted a sentient life to property status when they in themselves, because of the fact that they are sentient, conscious, have individualistic experiences of life and can suffer and feel pain. They warrant more consideration than being limited and legally labelled as property. And so it's not just about the act of killing. It's the whole philosophical teaching that allows us to view animals as being somewhat subordinate in terms of how we can use them.
Right. Okay. So I actually took quite a few philosophy classes, and I was going to bring some of this consciousness arguments in. I would say like, let's go down to even the smallest level. Like insects. You can't eat insects and be a vegan, right? I mean, because it's meat. It's a living animal.
Yes.
So you can't eat insects, right? I don't know. I think I would say just in the most tiny level, the weak argument for not being vegan is that eating insects doesn't do anything. Eating insects is not bad. Insects are barely conscious. They're automata. Can they experience? We really can't even say whether they experience. They're basically just a biological machine.
Right.
They're like. So I mean, I would say, boom, right there. You can cannot be vegan. Being vegan is not justified. I can justify not being vegan because I can eat insects and that's their life. So boom. I don't know.
I think that the insect argument is an interesting one. I think that environmentally speaking, insect farming is of course a vastly better alternative. Ethically, I mean, I don't know about the health. I don't know if they're a good source of protein, but I don't know about if there's any health consequences of doing so. From an ethical perspective, this is where it becomes somewhat of and I wouldn't say it's a morally grey area. I think that you're right in saying that as vegans, we would say that it's not acceptable to eat insects because they are alive. They do have an experience of life, and because it's still not a necessity for us to consume them, I still believe it's still morally justified to implement something like a situation of vertical farming where we can produce plants in warehouses inside and create a much more sustainable and ethical form of farming. Right, and they're doing it in England, I think in the US as well. So I think that there's still, in this grand scheme of things, we can create a system of plant farming that still trumps the ethical, the perceived ethical progressions of switching directly to insects. And also, I guess, in terms of a Western culture, it's going to be a lot easier to get people to eat plants than insects. It's like, hey, would you like this black bean burger, or would you like this crushed cricket burger? I think in terms of what's palatable and feasible for a Western society, the advocation of veganism is stronger and will carry more merit.
Right. So then I would say that I think you have a really good perspective on this, and I actually would say that I agree with you. I just think that what should be on this banner is not not being vegan justifiable, because that's actually not what you're arguing. What you're arguing is like a much greater, more important, bigger thing than just not being vegan. Right. I can give you so many arguments why being vegan today, like, maybe doesn't make sense or morally is justifiable. So I don't know. I think like coming into this argument and wanting to debate this is like kind of useless, because what you're really arguing for is something much greater and bigger.
Well, I think that may well be true, but I've got to get people in somehow, haven't I?
Yeah, I know.
So I give them a little bit of a baity title so to bring them in. But okay, let's talk about what we were saying. So you said that there are potentially several arguments that you could use.
Yeah. Give a few if you want.
Let's go for it. Let's work our way.
I think it's all about the consciousness argument. Like if the problem with being vegan is killing an animal is a problem, like why is necessarily killing an animal a problem? Why necessarily is it? And I went with the insect example because it's the lowest level of life. I mean, is killing an amoeba, is that wrong? Where do we draw the line of like moral incorrectness here? And I think if you're thinking about saying that these animals, they're definitely not conscious on the same level. There's different levels of consciousness, and consciousness, I think we can all agree, is bounded by the capacity of the animal's brain.
Right.
So. So like fish consciousness, I mean, killing and eating a fish, can a fish conceive of its own death? I don't really think so. Can a fish experience pain? Probably yes. I mean, I think without a doubt, I think it experience pain. Although I think like in this, I mean, I don't know. Then it goes to like more. Yeah, I don't know if I have anything else to say.
No, that's true. And so I think you're absolutely right in saying that there are scales. I mean, sentience is sentient, but there are scales of cognitive or cognition, right? And there are scales of what an animal can perceive or feel or experience or wish to avoid an experience. And I'm not denying that. But if we take this scale And then we obviously have to add plants as a food source on there as well. And we say, well, obviously plants, if we take that argument of consciousness, are still lower down than that of, say, insects.
Right, yeah.
And so if we're scaling morality and whether or not it's justifiable to kill an animal based on consciousness, or a life form based on consciousness, we start with humans, then we probably have like dolphins, killer whales, such. Still at the bottom is plants. And so if we want to continue that argument and be logically consistent with that, we should still be vegan because plants have the lowest form of consciousness compared to even that of insects or fish.
That's a great argument. That's great. Yeah.
Oh,
I mean,
thank you.
Totally.
I never hear that from people.
No, I mean, I think you're totally right. I think that's what I would say in response to that. But I just think like it's important for people to ponder and think about it for themselves, because then they can understand this whole stuff. But yeah, it does make. I mean, I was thinking like, why do we even eat plants? We should be eating inorganic matter, and that's actually a possible thing that we could do, in the future. I mean, if you're thinking like hundreds of years from now, like we don't even need to eat any living life.
Yeah. And I think we also have to work within the constraints of what society allows us to do. And so we can go into Target and we can buy plant-based foods, we can buy animal-based foods. We can't buy insect-based foods anyway. So even if we believed that was better than the other animals, it's still not a feasible alternative. Whereas plants are a feasible alternative in every supermarket, in every city in the US, really. So in terms of we have to work within the constraints of what society allows us to do, and being vegan is something that I'm saying people in a university like this can feasibly do. And so then there's the moral imperative to do so.
Right. So I was actually had this funny idea with a friend as like a transitional product for people that were eating meat that didn't want to eat meat. It's called algae meat.
Algae
It was
meat.
made out of algae.
Yeah.
It's like half algae. You can get it in like 50% algae, 30% algae, 70% algae. Full algae meat. It's good.
Sounds good. I'm in.
Anyway, thanks a lot, Ed. I really appreciate it.
I really appreciate you weighing.
I think you really got a good idea. I don't know. I'm just really happy to see someone here.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Have a great day, my friend. Thank you.
I'll look you guys up.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Hey, come on, sit down. How you doing?
I'm Scott.
I'm Ed. How you doing, Scott?